always say information doesn't equal transformation. Information plus application equals transformation. But I need the information. I need to learn how does the brain work? I have to be strategic and methodical in how I'm approaching this. I just will my way through this. I can't just kind of wing my way through this. I've got to I need to be strategic and clear of what is actually effective recovery look like. So I have to learn that, but then I have to practice that. Learning how to lift weights doesn't lift the weights. I got to get to the gym. I got to do the work. I got to put in the reps, right? And I said earlier that the brain changes with reps and relationships. And so it's learning what I need to do. It's doing that. I kind of joke, if you're not working this muscle, just as an example, this might be crass for your listeners, but you're going to work this muscle, meaning, if I'm not making calls, I'm going to go back to my old coping strategies. That's what I'm saying.
Partner betrayal is disorienting, heartbreaking, and results in absolute confusion for the betrayed partner. You worry that nothing in your life was real, and you fear that you will never be able to trust your spouse or yourself again. Well, welcome to the Rebuilding Trust podcast with Carol the Coach. I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, aka Carol the Coach, and what I can promise is that when you listen to my podcast, you'll begin to believe that there is hope. We will be hearing from experts all over the world who specialize in problematic sexual behavior, sex addiction, and infidelity. Together, we will be asking them the hard questions about how you both can rebuild safety, find strengths, grieve and mourn what you had, what you never had, and what you fear you will never find again. The truth is that rebuilding trust is possible, and I am going to show you the steps to working together to build a whole new marriage based on the honesty, authenticity, and transparency that your marriage deserves. Rebuilding Trust with Carol the Coach.
Well, welcome to Rebuilding Trust podcast. I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, and with me today I have Chris Chandler. Chris is a CSAT who reached out to our listserv to share some really exciting information and news with us. And I don't think I waited more than 6 seconds to say, Chris, would you please come on my podcast and talk about this stuff? Because Chris has blended AFAR research, which AFAR is near and dear to my heart. I have written Wisdom of the Masters, which is really from a previous podcast, and then I donate everything I make from the sales of those books to AFAR. They are see if I got this right, the American Foundation of Addiction Research.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
exactly
they're making a difference in the community for recovering addicts, drug and alcohol addicts too, but they specialize in sex addiction. And the more research we have, the more help we can get. So Chris has blended that with attachment theory, with partner sensitivity, with neuroscience of the brain. And so I said, would you please come on and talk about this all very important work? So Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor. I was so honestly a little giddy when I got your email. So thank you. I just felt really humbled and excited to just have a conversation with you and hopefully be of help to your listeners. So it's great.
Well, you're being a help to a lot of people, and we as therapists need all the help we can get incorporating these important dynamics. So,
oh my gosh. So much.
I'm so excited to get to know you better.
Yeah, always evolving too, right? I mean, you mentioned AFAR and the American Foundation for Addiction Research, and yeah, I sit on the board, and really, primarily, I mean, one of my passions with that is, and that this is Carnes in many ways, Dr. Carnes' passion and his life work, and just being able to continue that, being able to continue to move the research forward and understand not just addiction in the brain, but really recovery in the brain. How does the brain genuinely, effectively, most efficiently recover from addictive and compulsive behaviors in all forms? And so that is a deep passion for me. I've much of my career early on, I worked with Dr. Paula Riggs at the University of Colorado with the Encompass program, working with co-occurring disorders in adolescents. So trying to be, what is an evidence-based protocol for really helping adolescents that struggle with co-occurring disorders, which basically means mental health and substance use. And then working with Dr. Carnes on the Fulbright study. I mean, we spent, years collecting data and still splicing that data. looking for the genetic link for addiction. And so, yeah, it's just been a passion of mine to see how does the research inform what we understand of the brain and just this whole healing and recovery journey.
Well, and Chris said Dr. Patrick Carnes, and for anybody who doesn't know Dr. Patrick Carnes, and there's lots of people that don't, he is the father and the guru of sex addiction. He is the person that started the Institute for Addiction and Trauma Professionals. That's us as CSAT. And he's made it his mission. He's lived that life. He's recovered, and he's just a pioneer in this field. And so to get to work with him and his research, the Fulbright, as you mentioned, research is pivotal to what we know about addiction. And so one of the things that I loved when I was in addiction training for sex addiction, partners were not even really discussed. I mean, there might have been an hour on what is a partner and how can we support them, but it was really about the addict. And then ITAP, especially through Stephanie Carnes, really expanded that so that now our work with addicts is simultaneously our work with partners. And
Yeah.
so why do you think this work is so important for partners?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many layers to that question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so thankful that we, the research has extended because I run a women's group and for betrayed partners, and I run a lot of men's groups for addiction. But one thing I've really come to understand in the brain is that, in some ways, I mean, the experiences are obviously light years different apart, right? For what it's like to be a betrayed partner versus an addict. And I mean, this might be a not popular, opinion or I don't know how this will be received, but from a brain perspective, a lot of similarities as far as, like I've said to the women, trauma recovery is very similar in terms of like a parallel process with addiction recovery, right? They're both these very looping processes in the lower limbic part of the brain, brainstem, this survival, flight, fight, freeze that, I've often said for the guys that I work with, you don't have a porn problem, you have a pain problem. And that fundamentally, a lot of what we're understanding, our compulsive behaviors as the result of is really attachment disorders, attachment trauma. This is an intimacy disorder. It's the result of broken relational attachments in early childhood. Most often, there's a lot of layers to it, right? For sure. And so a lot of their nervous system is dysregulated and looking for some kind of safety and relief. And they just turned to a really, maladaptive coping strategy that worked, when they were younger, right? It makes sense. In AA, we say, we develop solutions to a problem, but the solutions became the problem. And so, for them, they're kind of looping in this compulsive behavior. And then as a result, that coping strategies created, absolute unconscionable, mayhem in our relationships, right? I mean, just damage beyond belief as far as our betrayed partners. And so, in the same way, I mean, that now is just kind of replicating this harm, right? Hurt people. And so, now we've kind of caused this trauma reaction in our partners. And so now they're in this process of trying to recover and re-stabilize their nervous system.
Yeah. And, you said earlier, this may not be a popular belief. And I think when we're pioneers in the field, like you and I both are, we come up with unpopular beliefs. For instance, I have always said that once an addict comes out of the fog and they're working on recovery, if they're in relationship with somebody, they are traumatized by the trauma that they brought to the other person. They get it and their limbic system goes wacky and, they don't know how to regulate their own sense of self and regulate their partner. And, I've run sex addiction groups forever, and my guys that are single, they say, I wish I had a partner. I would never want to do this to a partner, but a partner will help me get on track. A partner will keep me focused on what's really, really important in that intimacy pyramid that we talk about, which really starts with honesty and truth. Um, and so the unpopular view at the time, way back when in the early 2000s, for me was people would say, how can you say men are in trauma? They're not in trauma. They've been living the high life. Their wives are in trauma. And I said, no, they're both in trauma. And to
Yeah.
hear you talk about research that shows that the limbic system is equally impacted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's trauma repetition, right? And that's the tragedy, is that we pull our partners into our own trauma. Now, a lot of times partners have their own trauma histories, and that we're compounding, and so now we're talking about complex PTSD, and I mean it's just really tragic. But yeah, the similarities, right? Which I think is really beautiful how you framed a lot of this in your text. I use help them heal quite a bit, but just that empathy in pathos means in feelings, and it's a two-way street at some
Mhm.
point, right? I mean, obviously early on, this is all the responsibility of the addict, right, to repair the damage that he's caused. And the hope is that some point, someday, if we really can work towards healing and reconciling relationship, that part of intimacy is that it's reciprocal, and that we can both empathize with each other's traumas and pain, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like Help or Heal was an important manual. I was giving out empathy exercises to my men, but they needed more and they were hungry for more. But then when I finished the book, I said, oh boy, I haven't talked about the relationship repair. I haven't talked about the fact that now the wives have to be a part of the solution and they have to work together and co-create a whole new relationship based on recovery. And this is the hardest recovery to come back from. And so if there are slips or relapses, what can keep both parties safe? And I feel like your attachment theory is pivotal in describing what has to happen. So will you talk about the levels to your programming and what you've learned from the research?
Yeah. Well, one, I just want to say on that piece that I'm so thankful for Help Them Heal. Like, as much as I
Oh,
love Help or Heal, the collaborative nature around that I found so powerful. I just met with a guy yesterday that said, "Man, the game changer," because we ran all our groups through Help Them Heal last in Q4 of last year, and both for me the men's groups parallel the women's group. We all go through the same content together, and so he would read the
wow.
chapter to his wife at night, for the week. We go through a chapter a week and just working through the content. And so the men would oftentimes read the content together, right, in their relationship, and just said that was so powerful to not just be on an island, kind of, the addict's over here, supposed to be doing his work and getting fixed and whatever, but that they're collaborating, and that's a huge. I mean, that is a huge ask for a partner to be willing to collaborate, because it's like she legitimately has not done anything to contribute to this or cause this. And yet, so that just is I have so much admiration and respect for a partner that's willing to participate in that, in the journey, in the process and the work.
Well, and if I can just say something about Help Them Heal, um, I wrote that book with two perspectives. One is I wanted to help the couple follow something that I felt could be helpful in their relationship to get them over to post-traumatic growth. Because Patrick Carnes taught me best. He said, out of great suffering comes transformation and giving back and making a difference and leaving that legacy. So thank you again, Dr. Carnes, for your guidance. And I love post-traumatic growth. I mean, we see traumatized people from war and accidents and all sorts of things get stronger
That's
and
insane.
make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a little plug for Help Them Heal, because if you're thinking that you want to get better and you want to do something more with this pain and suffering,
Yeah.
Help Them Heal can help you do that either
Oh my
together or
gosh.
separately. We're not
Yeah.
always on the same track at the same time.
Totally. Yeah. But I'm just thankful for a resource that really integrates, because again, we talk about how important that is to be couple centric, right? And I feel like again, not popular opinion, but in our field, right, a lot of this work can become siloed, where it's like you have partner therapists and you have addict therapists, and it's really hard to like see the couple as a couple, right, to see the integrative work. And so I'm just overwhelmingly thankful. And again, from a brain perspective, it makes all the sense in the world, because the tracks are really so similar. Like we have so much to gain from each other's work, right? I mean, the guys that I work with, for them to be able to see the work that the little girl is doing in their wives and their partners, is I mean, that informs empathy, right? Like it's like, how do I practice empathy in a vacuum, in a silo? Like the best way to empathy is to see her work, her vulnerability, her risks, right? So yeah. The other thing I wanted to say on that too is, you mentioned starting with honesty, and and I'm going to use this maybe as a bridge to come back to your question around the brain and kind of the neuroscience. But you asked about the program, but my program for me is really built on the understanding of how the brain is structured. And so that foundation of honesty, honest in the Latin, honestas, means to own what is mine. And part of the challenge, I think, for the guys that I work with, to be honest with especially their spouses or their partners, it requires that they get honest with themselves. They have disconnected with their own sense of value, their own sense of integrity, their own sense of who am I? What is my truth, right? Because they've just been pouring gas on a fire, medicating for decades. And so there's just a lack of foundational, honesty with themselves. They've been lying to themselves far longer than they've been lying to their partner or anyone else, right? And so, again, I guess I say that as a setup to say, this runs so deep in the nervous system, so deep in the brainstem, that to just think that a guy can kind of just hit the ground running and being honest. It's like that. In fact, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this, but guys get sober from their sexual acting out behaviors long before they ever get sober from their honesty. Meaning, I know it's kind of a chicken egg, right? They're learning how to be rigorously honest, but I'll have guys that are 3-5 years sober and they're still lying about the dumbest stuff. I'll be mindful of my language on the podcast, but they're still not being fully transparent, and that's maddening, right? Especially for a partner. Like, how can you say you're in recovery and sobriety, and yet you're still not being fully transparent, truthful, honest? And it's like, man, that is the deepest part of the cave for some of these guys. That little boy that thinks, if you really saw me, right? Carnes speaks to this a lot, right? The 4 shame-based beliefs, that if you really saw me in all of who I am, you would not love me and accept me. You would reject me, right? And so then fundamentally, I'm on my own. I'm alone. Like, you're not for me. And again, this isn't necessarily conscious. This is deeply embedded. Pure Desire actually calls them limbic lies, like these beliefs that we just learned from a very early age.
Right. And again, I'm glad that you reminding our listening audience that these lies started way before the addict ever met the partner, and they were survival lies to not get in trouble and not get beat and not get shamed. And they grew and grew and grew. And there are so many things that can restore honesty, but it is a process and it takes a long time, right?
Yep. The brain changes with repetitions and relationship. Those are my 2 things for sure. So can I give a quick, just kind of overview of like just neural structure in the brain, and we can kind of think through how to, for me, that just kind of informs the whole recovery process, and that'd be all right.
Please.
Okay. I mean,
Go
you asked
slow. Go
yeah,
slow.
Okay. That's my biggest defect, character. I just, I get excited and passionate, and maybe a little bit nervous, and then I just kind of move fast. But so Daniel Siegel is one of my favorite researchers around the neurodevelopment of the brain, and he's at UCLA and has written a ton of books. If I had to recommend a few, I often will recommend Mindsight. Honestly, one of my favorites of his, just super foundational, is called The Whole Brain Child. Just as far as it's a parenting book, but just to understand the basic building blocks, the basic neurobiology of just human development, right? And so, and I could list a lot. I love his book Brainstorm on the Teenage Brain. I mean, he's just got a ton of material, right? But fundamentally, he talks a lot about this hand model of the brain, and the 3 primary building blocks of the actual brain. He also talks about the fact that we're finding now that we have brain cells in our gut and in our heart, and so but fundamentally we're talking about the triune brain, and so he talks about the brainstem, the limbic brain, and the prefrontal cortex, kind of like low brain, midbrain, and adult brain, and so the
And
brain
Chris
wires
said
electrically.
trihune, and that's TRIHUNE, isn't it?
Sure. I don't know if
Okay.
there's an H, but
Okay. It could be just, okay.
triune.
Because if you want to find out more about this is a major basic premise for addiction and for trauma. So go ahead.
100%. Yeah. So the brain wires from the bottom to the top in utero, right? So it's not just, I always say birth just to make it simple, right? 0 to 25, 26, but really it's pre-birth, right? I mean, the
Yeah,
brain
the
is
minute of
wiring electrically.
conception.
Right. And so
Mhm.
the electrical activity in the brain is wiring, and again, it's wiring up into the brainstem, up into limbic, and then ultimately prefrontal. And so all of the experiences that we're having, especially from 0 to 10, right? Because again, we're mostly wiring in brainstem. It's not completely sequential, right? There is some electrical activity in the prefrontal and limbic, throughout. But if you look at early SPECT scans of the brain or fMRI scans, you're primarily seeing a lot of gray matter. There's just not a lot of electrical activity going on in the top part of the brain, right? So most early experiences, those early attachment experiences, are happening in the lower part of the brain. Then the teenage brain comes online most robustly, roughly age 10 or so to about 14, 15. And then prefrontal activity is really coming online most actively around 16, 17, and then continuing until age 25, 26. And so you really have this kind of like neural scaffolding that's happening. And so all these life, especially early life experiences, and I don't know where to pause for a moment and say that I kind of do this because of those three primary structures in the brain. For me, the whole pathway to addiction, the way that we got into our addiction, and therefore the way we get out of our addiction, really is also a three-prong approach of behavior, core, relational, are my three categories that I talk a lot about. And so again, at the deepest part of the brain, where we're starting with is this relational category. Really, it's just attachment theory, right? Is that we
Right.
are relational beings from the womb, that we are created in relationship for relationship, and that that all of our experiences exist in relational connection, intimacy. And so some of that was really beautiful and good. This is something I think we don't speak to nearly enough in attachment world. We always focus on the pain, right? We run straight to that, but there was a lot of goodness, right? There was a lot of security in our attachments. And so it wasn't like all or nothing, all bad. There's a lot to celebrate in ways that we did experience attachment effectively. Is that fair?
Fair, very fair.
Yeah. So I just always like to highlight that. And of course, like it's the pain that is where we got stuck. So that's where we kind of lean into quickly. And so, brokenness in relational attachment, and we all experienced it. I always say there's two fundamental questions every little boy, every little girl is asking. Am I safe and am I seen, right? Which really has to do with fear and shame. Am I safe is really a brainstem question. It's the survival. It's that we're always scanning our environment for am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And those questions are not being asked overtly and they're not being answered directly. But that's what we're looking for, right? It's from a felt sense. And if you think of like a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, we don't have logical language. We don't have concepts of that. We're more, it's literally felt in our nervous system of
It's
like,
intuitive. Mm-hmm.
it's intuitive. Yeah. And so we're feeling this, we're just soaking in our environmental cues, from again, day 0. And, so I'm gonna run through this quick and then we can come back if you'd like. Brokenness in relational attachment drives core wounding. That's the next leg of the stool for me. Core wounding, literally we use the word trauma, which is just the Greek word for wound, right? So I've
Right.
used this analogy before where I think of the brain kind of like a baby tree. Like if we drill little holes into a baby tree, it's not going to kill the tree. We can pull the drill out, the tree will keep growing. But if we cut that tree down at 70, 80 years old, we can literally go back and see in those moments in time where that little girl at 3 years old, the little boy at 5 years old, those moments of fear and shame, how those kind of like puncture the nervous system, so to speak, right? They drive fear and shame deeply into our nervous system. And that was what we call trauma, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Gabor Mate, Bessel van der Kolk, I mean, all this understanding of trauma, and I know that you do a lot of this work, it just gets disintegrated, disconnected from our in some ways our adult selves, right? Richard Schwartz talks about kind of the exile gets kind of exiled, right? Kind of cast off. And there's a separation between my true self and my wounded parts. And so that distance, that disconnect leaves us feeling really, again, we're back to dishonesty, like disconnected from our sense of self.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. I'm going to leave it at that. So brokenness in relational attachment drives core wounding, core trauma, and that drives behavioral coping strategies. We all find some behavioral package to try and get our needs met, right? And some of those are reasonable and appropriate, like academics and performance and success and humor and fashion and whatever, right? Like we're trying out little things like, middle school, high school, college. We're trying to find, ways to relate to our world to help ourselves feel safe and powerful and desirable and all these things. And a lot of those things were really appropriate and reasonable. But, for the guys that I work with, some of those things not only did not invite deeper intimacy and connection, but actually pushed, everyone away from us, right? They reinforced the very wounds that we're trying to medicate ultimately. And so, obviously the sex, drugs, rock and roll. And so that is where we start in recovery, is we start with the behavioral work first, because that's what's gotten completely out of control, right? So we start with, we've got to get containment around the forest fire. We've got to be able to, stop acting out behaviors. But I always tell guys, this is not a don't touch your penis program, which means this is not just about not looking at porn or not masturbating. We start with behavioral work first so that we can heal the deeper core wounds that drove the behavior in the first place, so that we can ultimately get all the way back upstream to relational intimacy, which is what we lost connection with all the way back, right? I feel like I just realized I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna pause.
No, keep going. No, I absolutely agree with you. And so why do you think that benefits both the addict in recovery and the partner to understand that?
Yeah, because again, they both have traumas. This is a big ask for a partner to be willing to kind of see, an addict's trauma. And I don't actually do that like early on. For the first 1 to 2 years, like I talk to the guys, like it's all like you created this mess. It is completely 100% your responsibility. You've got to stand on your own 2 feet, learn how to get sober. Which, by the way, we can talk more about it. But I don't think it's impossible in individual therapy by yourself, but I have just found in 20 years of doing this work that the guys that are in groups always get better faster. And so you asked about the program, and I have just gone all in. I've always run groups and individual work side by side, but I hit a point a couple of years ago where it was like over and over. I just saw guys that were in groups were getting better faster in every way imaginable. And so it's just like, okay, I'm just going to go all in on group work. I still work with people individually a little bit here and there, but I run a lot of groups, and that is where I see the most success. And that's what I want, right? I want to see results. I want to see men and marriages get healthy, better and faster.
Well, and I will say, when I was in the lunch line with Patrick Carnes, and it was during our training in 2007, and I said, what is the number one thing I can do to help addicts, because I'm not an addict and I'm not a male? And he said, hands down, Carol, start a group. He said, let them crosstalk, let them support each other, let them hold each other accountable, and you will see faster recovery. And so my listeners have heard that a million times from me, because group is essential to building a new person, and what happens in the group happens in the coupleship or in the family or in the community, whatever it is.
Yeah. And that's where I wanted to come back to the coupleship, is that, a partner is not able to reciprocate early on, nor should she, right? She just has to be safe because of, the level of damage that he's caused with his acting out behavior. So he's not going to be able to have a reciprocal, empathic relationship with his wife. It's just not going to be there. So then the question is, well, where does that little boy go to get those empathic needs met? Like, it has to be in a group context, right? He has to get that from other men. So that's his safety building, right? He's learning how to be rigorously honest in the group, and learning how to just experience real connection there.
Well, so, and I think it's other men, but I think it's us too, because we get to know all their secrets, and we legitimize them as a coping skill, as maladaptive as it is. And so that's where you have to have a good therapist running the group, doing the couples work. And like you said, you don't even do that much individual. Neither do I anymore.
Yeah.
It's both of those modalities. So
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
singing your
100%.
praises.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I as great as I think I might be, not really. I have often said though, a bad group is better than no group. So I mean, I just think there's something powerful about community, and obviously, we can be more and more effective in how that's structured and run. But I just think getting into any group, right, is a good start. But yeah,
And I'd say trust your gut. If you're in a bad group, get out of that bad group,
that's
because
true.
Chris is being overly kind for groups. A bad group is not a good group if it's not holding you accountable and showing
That's
you
fair.
empathy at the same time.
That's fair. You're right.
Yeah.
It's overstated.
I know I'm right.
I'm trying to emphasize that
How
the
important
power
groups are.
and importance of getting into community. So, but yeah, without question, there's a lot of bad groups, unfortunately.
And support groups, 12-step groups,
Right.
religious groups,
100%.
all over the board.
Yeah, well, to that point, actually, I do work in the faith community. I'm a faith-based counselor, and so I will say there has been a tremendous amount of trauma in, particularly in faith communities, because there's a lot of hiding that goes on, right? There's a lot of gaslighting and like, hey, we're being honest, but we're really not. Like they have no concept, no practice of rigorous honesty and transparency. So I have seen a tremendous amount of harm done, unfortunately, in the church, and that grieves me deeply, because that's where healing ultimately is designed to happen, most, in my opinion. So, so that's a good word.
Well, I was talking to Bill Herring on a podcast yesterday, and I've been on vacation, so I'm booking you guys together, and then we're going to place you side by side. And Bill runs a group every day. He has 7 groups, and he said to me, I know you may not believe me, Carol, but I've run over 2,000 groups, and I have run over 2,000 groups. Now, they haven't been partner and addict groups, but when you do a couple of groups every week for 10 years, you got a couple thousand groups under your belt. And you have to admit, Chris, you said you weren't going to sing your praises, but your investment in this community has taught you that theory of when we know better, we do better.
Yeah. And
that's how we live. When we know better, we do better. We start out having our own issues and problems and shields and all sorts of things. But these guys and these women have a lot to teach us, and they do that every day.
Well, let me teach then for just a minute, so that you guys know your listeners know what kind of group to look for, because I do think this is important. Okay. I mean, obviously, I'm happy to work with whoever is looking, but also, the two things that I think really drive a good group are connection and content. I think you need both, right? And so in the therapy world, in my graduate school days, we talked about, on one end of the continuum, you have psychoeducation groups that are all content driven and teaching based, and there's not a lot of process, not a lot of connection. On the other end of the continuum, you have what they call process groups, which is all just kind of connection. This would be like accountability groups, and like we just kind of like check in and connect, but we're not really like learning together. And for me, like both have to be integrated. And so for me in the program, we have connection groups and we have content groups. In the connection groups, there's still content, and in the content groups, there's still connection, but we're trying to like leverage a little bit more on these sides. So I run about 25, maybe 30, but about at least 25 groups a week. And so 15 of them are connection groups. Those are classic therapy groups, about 10 to 12 men in each group. And we go deep, right? I just had a guy share his first step this morning, and it's like, I mean, the group is crying together, right? It's like, just like, there's almost no words at the level of trauma that this guy's been through. And we just feel that collectively, right? And that's called love. That's called intimacy. That is what what the little boy's been craving his whole life and not experiencing. So I don't know how you do that just by yourself, on your own recovery process. Like that just happens. Right. Yeah. So those are connection groups. And there's so much to learn, right? Dr. Carnes talks about this 3 to 5 year process, and good grief, he's given us 30 tasks, and within that, like it's just innumerable performables in order to accomplish these tasks. And I always say information doesn't equal transformation, that information plus application equals transformation. But I need the information. I need to learn like how does the brain work? I have to be strategic and methodical in how I'm approaching this. I can't just like will my way through this. I can't just kind of wing my way through this. I've got to like I need to be strategic and clear of like what is actually effective recovery look like. So I have to learn that, but then I have to practice that. Like learning how to lift weights doesn't lift the weights. Like I got to get to the gym. I got to do the work. I got to put in the reps, right? And I said earlier that the brain changes with reps and relationships. And so it's learning what I need to do. It's doing that. Like, I mean, I kind of joke, like if you're not working this muscle, just as an example, this might be crass for your listeners, but you're going to work this muscle, meaning, if I'm not making calls, I'm going to go back to my old coping strategies. That's what I'm saying. And so, and there's so many things that I have to learn how to like, we talk about naming the last 1%. Like it's not just enough to get on a phone call. I have to learn how to share in a way that is actually specific. I need to name the things that are bringing me shame. And I need to lead with that right off the bat. We say, lead with your weakness, right? Don't talk about the Seahawks. Talk about, what's the thing that you don't want to name right now? That's the thing you lead with.
And that is what I say too. I say make 2 calls or 2 texts a day. Let's face it, it's resorted to text. And I say one is to connect with somebody who is hurting and say, how are you doing? I'm here for you. What do you need? Tell me more. And then the other one is, I'm going to be vulnerable. This is what I'm struggling with. And I just wanted to share it with you so that we could talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you have that reciprocity of giving and taking, and let's face it, for some guys, it's easy to say, dude, how you doing? I heard you in group today and I want to hear more about it. But it's not easy to say, I am hurting and, I don't know if our marriage is going to work out, or I don't know if I can really do this. This recovery is hard stuff.
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
I mean, that's, so much what that little boy was craving and really looking for a lot of times in digital images or acting out partners was some kind of validation, affirmation, right? And it just obviously was not only not what he needed, it was just medicating and driving it further. So to really get his needs met. And then all the way back to your initial question, which was how does this help both addict and partner? I would say that now, having run a women's group now for a couple of years, part of what started that was that I had women that had gone through kind of classic betrayal trauma groups, but they just felt like they weren't growing. They were kind of like, they felt like they weren't dying, which was a good start. But to your point on post-traumatic growth, they weren't really turning that corner. And so part of that early on was starting to introduce your work to my guys, because I didn't have direct relationship with their wives at that point. And that was a big help. But then it was like, well, why not just do that together? Like, why not just run a women's group where we can go through Help Them Heal separately? So seeing women come in, seeing 10 women come around each other and be able to relate in that way, I have felt very out of my element. And yet it's also to see these women come in for the first time and just start weeping because they're like, I didn't know how bad I needed this, right? I just needed other women that really saw me, but also not just to kind of complain about how bad his behaviors are, but to connect and heal the little girl so that they can grow regardless of what he ends up doing. Like the marriage may not work, but to see these women all in on like genuinely using whatever their pain and trauma is to grow through that. And then so far it's been pretty powerful to see how the couples have been able to, experience that synergistically together.
Well, and to speak to partner groups, because I too have run partner groups, and there has to be a part of everybody's work in group that says, this is what I'm working on to get stronger, to learn from the suffering, to move forward. And unfortunately, there are a lot of partner groups that are really supportive on the pain, but they don't move the person forward. And that becomes trauma repetition, and so for our partners out there, I know that I've trained my partners to say, okay, this group is no longer helping. And what can I do? Where can I go? I have specifically post-traumatic growth groups and I have therapists and coaches that do post-traumatic growth groups. And it doesn't dismiss the pain, but it says you can be more than you think you are. I don't want my partners to be defined as a partner. I want you to be more than a partner. I want you to live a legacy.
Mm.
And that sounds like a
Praise God.
big ask, but the truth is, I don't know about your groups, but my groups are 15-week intervals, and then they have the opportunity to sign up. And the average group lasts for most partners or addicts at least 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Usually I'm kicking them out of the nest saying, there's other people that need this spot. You're good.
Yeah.
You're doing great. You can hang out with these guys and have dinner,
Yeah. That's great.
But again,
So
our field, we're a young field, and we're all pioneers. And my favorite saying, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah, no, it's well said. And I haven't really stepped into that threshold on the partner side, but on the addict side, one of the other structures, the way that we've kind of designed the program is that guys that have been walked through the work, once they cross that 3-year mark, really by year 4 and into year 5, we have level 1, level 2. And so we call that level 3. And those guys are actually starting to now lead their own groups within the program because, our recovery is not our own. Like we it's just like the 12-step model. Like we do our work, but there's so many other men that need help. Right. And so it's been really cool to see there's that service piece, that ability to bring my story and offer that strength, hope, and love to someone else is just is a critical part of healing and growth.
Okay. Now we've got to wrap up, and I feel like we could talk all day long. I feel like I've made a new friend in Chris. Have our paths crossed? Have you taken my Help Them Heal or anything like that workshops?
I've just studied all your work from a distance, and I've been to a lot of your conferences and seminars, but yeah, so.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you. And if you want to find out more about Chris, he is at www.breath2bones.com. And you can schedule a consultation there for him. Obviously, the man does groups. I thought Bill Herring had the most groups ever. And it sounds like he doesn't even hold a candle to you. So I am just really appreciative of the fact that you're doing this work. You're doing it from all angles. That's what's going to make a difference. As you said, it's going to expedite things. It makes it efficient. And we're all about finding the best pathways for our guys, right? A gentle path
100%.
for sure.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say as we end for today?
Just keep I'm proud of you guys, whoever your listeners are. I'm just thankful that they are, taking active steps to try and understand, what's going on, where their pain's coming from. They're seeking resources and help. So I'm just, I'm really thankful, I'm thankful for you, Carol. I'm thankful for the resources that you provided and that there is a path. I mean, that is what feels most hopeful and helpful for me is like, okay, we really are coming to understand with more clarity the nature of addiction, the nature of recovery. And so I'm excited for you. Just keep asking the questions, keep pursuing the resources.
Oh, I love that. And I love the psychoeducational piece with the actual deep dive into the trauma and into the pain. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I'm going to ask you a quick question. Have you read the book, Unleashing Your Power?
I have not yet.
It is for partners. And it actually came from a group work for women manual that I wrote. And so it's for betrayed partners. It has exercises you can use in your partner group. Take a look at it.
1,000%. I've seen it. Yeah. I've kind of gone all in on for 15, 20 years on the addict side. And so I've just recently kind of been opening myself up more. Oh, look at that. There we go.
Yeah. Unleashing your power, because it's about finding themselves again.
Beautiful.
So, Chris, I want you to get this book because I want you to be my advocate. We need more of you in our field.
I'm already your advocate, but now I'll get another tool in my tool belt. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and make it a great week. And God bless you for the work you're doing.